I had always thought that I wasn't racist. I didn't realize the difference between not being a racist and being anti-racist, and the extra steps and work that goes into showing up in that way.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
Today, I have an incredible guest for you. It's my coach who has been supporting me for the past 3+ years, and I absolutely adore her, and I know you will. Her name is Jess Miller, and she is an integrative business strategist. She is mom to 7-year-old Charlotte and fierce believer that building your business shouldn't cost you your life. After walking away from a multi-award-winning 7-figure business because she was no longer willing to sacrifice her health, relationships, and happiness on the altar of success, Jess created a new definition for herself, one that's rooted in safety, simplicity, and self-trust. With degrees in economics and communications, training in the nervous system and trauma-informed coaching, and decades of experience in both owning and operating multiple businesses, as well as supporting countless others, Jess brings a potent blend of strategy, somatics, and soul to her work, where she helps values-driven changemakers to create generative profits. Take a listen. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Represented Podcast with me, Aniki Shuru, and I am absolutely delighted to bring to you today my coach. For the past 3 years, Jess Miller has been supporting me, and she is one of my dearest friends who I love so much. And today, we want to talk to you about what it means to do inclusion work beyond business, like the impact, what life looks like when you begin to do this work on an ongoing basis. And I can't wait to dive in. Jess, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I have been wanting to have this conversation with you on the podcast. As you know, you are sort of like the wind beneath my wings when it came to the making of this podcast and many, many things that my business, the milestones that my business has experienced. You've been behind this. And even when it comes to the editing, your husband,
It's a family affair.
it's a family affair, yes. So I'm excited to have you on here. And the question I want to start with, Jess, is how did you arrive here? And this is a question I love to ask white people specifically, how they arrived to doing racial equity work, because it's not something that every white person is running to do or even realize that they need to do it. So how did you arrive here? What was the catalyst for you?
Such a good question. And I've been really reflecting on the depths of this journey, because when I tell the story, I'm often talking about a specific event that happened in early 2020 where I was running a summit online and basically had been called out for the lack of inclusion in the lineup. And so that has been the, I guess, first most catalyst for diving into the work in the way that I have. But since doing the work, I realized that it's been this undertone, and I just hadn't been aware of the depths and the nuance to which this work could be explored. And it was definitely a confronting time when this event happened, when this call out kind of happened. And fortunately, I was held in a mastermind with Kate Northrup, who is very big in anti-racism work and has really done a lot there, and was able to really essentially take me under her wings and kind of go like I was coming in this kind of white tears, full victim mode of like, do they not realize like I've had the applications, anyone could apply, and like all the stories, right, of how I thought I was being inclusive. And she was just like, all right, just like, let's actually break this down and have a conversation about it. And then she connected me with her DEI consultant, and I had some conversations with her, and then a conversation with you when you reached out so graciously to me at the time. And it just kind of has all become a snowball from there.
Mm. Do you think having another white woman to go to talk to about the call out and you
Mm.
potentially being misunderstood? Look, I'm an inclusive person. I don't even understand why they're saying this. I had processes and procedures in place. Did it make it easier to approach a white woman about this rather than even the thought of going to an anti-racism educator, a DEI expert in this field?
So this is where the naivety comes in, because I didn't even realize that that was a thing until it was waved in front of me that like, oh, let me connect you with my DEI educator. Let me connect you with these people that can help you have the conversation.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like that's where I say like, while I had always thought that I wasn't racist, I didn't realize the difference between not being a racist and being anti-racist, and the extra steps and work that goes into showing up in that way.
I think you've hit on such a note that a lot of online business owners, a lot of white people who think I'm a good person, I
Mm.
volunteer, I have friends who come from different backgrounds. Surely this work of racial equity, I even have people of color inside my programs and they're friends of mine. So surely this work of anti-racism is not for me. It is for those who are racist. But I want you to share why, particularly given your experience and the things that you've learned over 3, 4 years now, that you didn't know, that you thought you knew, why this could be an area of a gap for them that they don't realize they have, and the need to embrace this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, if I think back to even as far back as my childhood, I lived in a lot of regional remote towns where the predominant population was actually First Nations people, and that as the white family in the community, we were part of the minority. And so through doing this work, and specifically with you unpacking some of those unconscious biases, I remember a time where it came up in conversation that I actually, and I think we were talking about application forms at the time where you kind of disclose whether you're Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander or and things like that. And I was like, oh yeah, I could build this into some onboarding. And you were like, hang on a sec, Jess, like, let's talk about this for a moment. And it really dawned on me that I had this perception that ticking those boxes actually gave you a leg up and actually gave you an advantage. And so how amazing would it be to provide this opportunity for people to tick these boxes?
Mhm.
And that was just purely shaped by this young child that was in a very low socioeconomic family. And I would see these Indigenous families getting all of these handouts and support and all of that, that we as our family weren't. And it seemed to me, I was like, oh, well, like if you tick this box, then that's a real big advantage and you get all
Mhm.
these extra things. And so unconsciously, that has been something that has carried with me behind the scenes. And I then think about like through high school, I went on trips. I went to like Vanuatu and volunteered. Post high school, I was an au pair in North Africa. When I was studying uni, I did intercultural communication as part of my journalism degree. I did human rights as part of my international relations degree. I've worked in the media and was the person that was always championing the the stories that wouldn't normally get picked up. Like I went, I live in the Pilbara, a pretty culturally significant place for the Nulama people. And I remember going out to the Nurawana community where it is a really traditional First Nations community out on country. And they had built this school for the children out there and there was no teacher resource being provided. And so I guess I had this perception because I was so entrenched in the community with our First Nations people. I had done these, I guess, units as part of my degree. I was like, well, I'm really socially conscious and I'm really involved in social justice and I'm a good person and I would not, discriminate or like you say, like I'm not excluding anyone intentionally.
Yes.
So I thought I was doing the right things. And what I realized is it's less about like, yes, we can do all of those things and that's great, but like what proactively are we specifically doing to include people? And at the time when I looked around with the event, which was the catalyst, the spaces that I was occupying were predominantly white spaces. The spaces that I was advertising and promoting the event were predominantly white spaces. And so, sure, I wouldn't have discriminated had a person of color applied, but they probably weren't even seeing it to get the opportunity to apply.
Mm-hmm. And oh, I love everything you shared because I feel like a lot of people will identify with the identity and the different things that you were doing and go like,
Mm.
oh, she's talking about me. That's my story. But I am an inclusive person. I don't understand how I could possibly be excluding. And I love the idea of how you've painted the picture of the spaces you occupied, because the spaces you occupy give you your sense of identity and the lens with which you're looking through. And if
Mm.
you're looking through purely a white lens, that is what you're going to elevate. That is what you're going to subscribe to. That's the lens with which you're going to see things through. And possibly, if people of color did apply to come to that summit, there could have been some implicit biases in
Mm.
place where you go like, yeah, I had people apply, but this felt like a good fit given the rooms I am a part of, the rooms and the spaces that I occupy, and doing that without even knowing it, you know?
Mm.
And that is why when it comes to doing racial equity work, you begin to realize, hang on, I'm not as inclusive as I thought I was. I'm not as clued in as I thought I was. And that's where the whole, you begin to learn from a place of consciousness, one that possibly didn't exist before. And this is where I'm seeing a lot of people find themselves where they are like, I'm a good person. I'm doing the right thing. And so they stop there thinking they don't need to do this work anymore. They're the good ones. We need to get the people who are the racists, they're the ones who need to be educated. But a lot of times what we come to realize is that those who think they're doing the right thing are actually the ones who could be perpetuating the systems of exclusion, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If not for the call out, or in all honesty, I probably would have just gone on and never delved into this work because I would have been that person that's like, well, I'm doing all of these things. I've, like you say, got the friends from diverse backgrounds. I've been to the different places. I've done these things as part of my degrees, like all of that sort of stuff. I'm not actively, against anyone or a mean person. I'm a kind person. And so, yeah, and I remember like in the time of that call out, it felt, I think that was the thing that felt the most challenging for me because I felt like my identity or my character was being questioned as a person. I'm like, I really am a kind person, and it's something that felt really challenging to experience, and it's been through time and through education that I'm like, okay, this is so much bigger than whether you're a kind person or not.
100%. And what is amazing about your journey, Jess, is that you have stayed in the work. A lot of people, particularly back in 2020, when this work took center stage, a lot of people were investing in courses, getting into programs where this was a focus, trying to be as inclusive as possible, bringing DI educators into their spaces, into their group programs, buying books on anti-racism.
Mhm.
But that's as much as they did. And it stopped there because this is work where you actually have to be intentional to stay in it. And if these
Mhm.
are issues that you're not facing on a daily basis as a white person, it is difficult to stay in it. You've got to be intentional. What is it about you, Jess, that has enabled you to stay in this work? Because you didn't have to, but you have stayed and
Mhm.
you've made this a lifelong journey. I can attest to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, you, Annie, it's been really supportive. And I remember we've had so many conversations because I can be that type A perfectionist where I think I need to be doing like fully immersed in all the programs. I need to be reading the books. I need to be listening to the podcast and like doing, 1000%. And you're constantly in the back of my mind about like make it sustainable, Jess. It doesn't have to be this big deep. And because I remember when I first started diving into it, it is this big like unearthing, and it really brings up so much and can be quite confronting to look at the ways and places that you've contributed in the past, and to unpack that and to start to also release some of the shame around that, some of the guilt around that, some of the fears around making those mistakes again. It really is a journey that, yes, requires education, but also requires that mindset support and that healing that I think is so unique in the spaces that you provide. Because, yes, like you said, there's so many ways you can get the education, but can you get the mindset? Can you get the healing? Can you get that deep processing of all of that ground shaking, earth shattering stuff that you will be confronted with when you start to unpack some of the things and some of the ways that you've contributed? So I think, yeah, first and foremost that, and then the relationship that you and I have as friends means that this work is incredibly important to me, and the fact that I have a really diverse cohort of clients, like I feel like I have a strong responsibility to them to continue to show up for the work. And also it's one of those things that once you see, you
Yeah.
can't unsee. And then it becomes like I don't want any of my clients to ever leave working with me and feel like something happens to them and they're like, oh, why did Jess never bring this up? Or that my daughter goes out into the world and says something or does something, and people are like, oh, why didn't you know about this? Like, it's just become so entrenched, not only in my business, but also in my home.
Wow. I think I've just had an aha moment with the first point where you pointed out the kind of space that you've been held in, that earth-shattering, the feeling that you can bring yourself. And this, one of the things, the results of working together has taught me is that not all white tears are harmful. Because when
Mm,
I arrived at this work myself, and even the experiences I had had, plus all the research I had undertaken, white tears stems from white fragility, not wanting to really dive into this work of anti-racism because it brings up certain feelings and nobody wants to deal with those feelings. And
mm,
so we will project on something else or make ourselves the victim. And those tears are, oh, how could I do this? I'm such a terrible person, and completely hijack the conversation. What I've come to learn, particularly with the kind of clients that I'm attracting, is that there are different sets of tears where they're like, I did cause harm and it's left a wound, and that wound needs to heal. And I need somebody who can hold space for that wound to help it heal. And if we're not providing spaces for that healing to happen, then we're actually letting people go out there wounded and not wanting to come back into this work because they feel like that's work that left me wounded. I got called out back in
mm,
2020. I'm not going to do this work. But if that wound is tended to and it becomes something that healed, then yes, we can look back at it back in 2020. Yes, I was called out, but
mm,
these is the result. It's no longer a wound that hurts because of the work that I am continually doing. And the benefits I have reaped from doing this work, which brings me to the next question, which is actually before we get into the benefits, I want to just circle back to what you said about our friendship. So we've worked together now for over 3 years,
Mm.
and we can honestly say that our friendship has gone beyond business. There's the care, the tenderness, the checking in, haven't had from you from a while. How are you doing? How's everything? And it's not from a transaction perspective. I'm not getting in touch with you because you pay my bills, so to speak. I'm getting in touch with you because I care. I want to find out how you're
Mm.
doing. And our relationship is unique because we've never met in person. We've
Mm.
never, it's all been virtual. It's all been from meeting on Instagram and knowing each other and a relationship forming from there. And I think values plays such an integral part in connecting people. How do you think that has played out for us? Because you said that as you're serving your clients, it would be a disservice to those who come from racially diverse backgrounds for you not to do this work because the
Mm.
things that break my heart break your heart. And I think it is the values that brings that glue into our relationship.
So well said, Annie. And I think that that's a really important point and something that, as someone that kind of can be quite highly sensitive, I think it's important to be surrounded with people that feel the same things that you feel and have the same heartbreaks that you have. And, you know, we don't need to look very far to realize how much hardship and heartache there is in the world right now. And there are like plenty of people and plenty of circles that will gloss over and just not have those conversations or look the other way because it is too confronting. It is really uncomfortable. You know, when we look at children starving and just the most horrendous atrocities that are happening, if we look at Palestine and things like that. And of course, people don't want to talk about it and people don't want to look, but to have friends and connections that are like, yeah, this is really painful, but let's have a conversation about it. Let's actually work out how we can be proactive and be part of the change because if everyone looks away, nothing changes. And one person doing something, okay, that's maybe not going to have a huge amount of impact, but one person having a conversation with another person and another person and another person who each of them do something, that's how all of a sudden the whole world's looking and paying attention.
Yes. And isn't that the essence of leadership? Isn't
Mm.
that what draws us to one another? That I can come into your space and you're not muting yourself and not talking about this because it's controversial, but because your values are so deeply connected to who you are as a human, you will speak up when you see things that are not right. And that will influence the people who are attracted to you. It will influence the people who want to work with you. And I believe that the theme in the online coaching space is changing. I've seen
Mm.
us go from where we talk about money and growth and profit. And I think that will always be, the foundation and the bedrock that brings conversation and clients on. But I think we're shifting. We're shifting more to values based, particularly with what is going on in the world right now, as we're seeing Palestine and the genocide that is indeed taking place. People are becoming more discerning. Buyers are becoming more sophisticated. They're not just being sold anything like back in 2020 when somebody promised you, buy this and you'll get this, and people were quick to buy. People are taking their
Mm.
time. And
Mm.
it's the values. Do we have similar values? Is there something that you're doing that as a human I feel connected to? And a lot of times that is what ends up attracting them and wanting to work with you more so than saying these are the results that I got from my client. And even though those are big things, people want to get results, of course, it's the values that I'm seeing really taking center stage now.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the high income earners and celebrity coaches and things like that that we see in the space, there is this looking to them and going like I'm all for women making a lot of money. Like my whole
Yes.
movement is around profitability and growing your business and your income. And never see money as let's make more money to have more money. And I personally, while I'm here to celebrate the wealth, I would never sign up to work with the coach that's like, oh, I'm flying private jets and like buying Prada handbags and like good on you if that's what you want. Like I
Oh.
personally can say that I'm more attracted to the person that has built this abundance of wealth that they then use that overflow to pour
Mhm.
into causes that they care about to really support positive change in the world. And that for me is the fuel of like why we want to see more women holding wealth and more diverse women holding wealth because of the social impact that that is going to create. And so yeah, even down to sure make your money, but how are you spending it? How are you stewarding it for the good of humanity? They're the decisions that people are starting to look at when they do align with people and do align with brands and are becoming more ethical and conscious consumers.
Mm. And that's what attracted me to you is that you support change makers, people who want to shake up the spaces that they occupy, people who are making impact. It's not just like for me, being a Black migrant woman, the money that I make in my business doesn't just support my needs and the needs of my family. It also extends to my relations back home in Kenya, the areas that we've been able to invest in and support, which by extension, very much the work you and I have done together. So you, in essence, are supporting projects in Kenya. You're supporting causes and people's lives are being elevated because of the work that we're doing together. And so for me, and I think it's a very cultural thing when you, especially for women, when you are doing well, when you are making, even when you're not financially at the top, seven, six-figure
Mm,
business, there is this idea, or it's very much within us that we have to give back. It's not all about
mm,
us and how well we're doing and sending our kids to the best schools and driving the best cars and living in the best neighborhood. What about the people you grew up with? What about where you come from? What about that person who is in need? How can you help them take a step closer to reaching their dreams? And for me, that's
mm,
what excites me. That's what gives me the fuel to want to do more because wealth that is shared has the
mm.
ability to do so much more. But it's also so much more fulfilling than living in your bubble, doing your
Yeah.
thing, and that's it.
Yeah. So well said, Annie. And yeah, I think that there is more and more people just kind of coming to this realization like, yes, fancy things are fun and nice, but there is an emptiness to it. And it's really incredible when we can can make those impact and to have those ripples of impact from the work that we do and the way that we steward our money. Like every action that we take creates a ripple. Like it's kind of like the butterfly effect. And so we can always choose consciously like how what kind of ripples we want to make, what kind of impacts that we want to leave. And when we have unpacked and started to do this work of really being aware of the issues that are being faced in our society and systemically, it just it just provides such a huge opportunity to amplify that and to be even more intentional with the ripples that we're able to create.
Absolutely. An area I feel that people don't quite understand, particularly online business owners, when it comes to prioritizing inclusion work, is the benefits. They think, oh,
Mm,
yeah, I'll get to do this work. I'll have this heightened awareness of the wrong things that I am doing. But they don't understand that they are tangible benefits and also intangible benefits. And I just want us to talk a little bit about your journey and how the benefits of doing this work have enabled you to be a better coach in terms of your skills, how
mm.
doing this, being more inclusive, has enabled you to be better at what you do.
Yeah, it's one of those things that is so enriching, like you said, both tangibly and intangibly. And so, as a space holder, as a coach, it has definitely opened up a level of awareness that wasn't previously there. And so, I could have spoken about money and business all day long and been kind of, I guess, to use your phrase, like beating a dead horse sometimes, to like kind of constantly be like, okay, this is how we do it, and blah blah blah, without ever understanding the nuance and the starting point. And some of the things that I might coach you on that are feel like obstacles for you aren't things that a white woman might come up against as an
Yeah.
obstacle. And so having that depth of understanding to be able to see those areas and hold you through navigating them is really, really enriching. And in fact, could actually be quite harmful had I not had that awareness and just been like, okay, well, like I don't understand what the problem is here. Like just go and do the thing.
Go be visible,
Yeah.
Annie.
Just go make this podcast. Like, come on, what's wrong with
Mhm.
you, Annie? Realizing like there's lots of things to unpack and to really work through. And I feel like that is then why there's been this attraction of diverse clients coming in, because and it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like
Yes.
I came in and did represented and then the next week I had all these women of color beating down my door to work with me. It's been a gradual process of continuing to deepen in the work, continuing to show up and show my commitment and care to this and the embodiment of this, that then over time people lean in and it
Mhm.
creates that awareness. And then, like I said before, like that then becomes a self cycling thing that, well, of course, I'm going to stay in the work because I have a responsibility to and I care to. It's important to me too, because it reflects the world that I want to see. And yeah, then it's meaning now that I have a wider pool of clientele to draw from. The group spaces that I hold are so much richer. The conversations that we have in these spaces. I mean, when I think about a group that I'm holding at the moment with Sam inside of Slow, and we have a really diverse cohort in there, and where we talk about things like rest and sustainability in your business, and with women in there of Asian descent, there's a lot of conversations that come up about the good Asian woman that doesn't rest, and that we're having to really support them in such a different way to unpack that lineage and that ancestry that's really entrenched within them of needing to show up a certain way. And if not for the continuous work in their space, that's not a conversation I could have.
Oh, I love that because that is such a practical example of how to support a group of people who have very specific needs. And having
Mm,
been in this work long enough to understand there are certain kind of questions I can ask that are empowering, that will bring out the best in them. There are certain things that I need to understand. What worked for this group of people is not necessarily going to work for them. And also just getting to know them and understanding that Asian culture. I think you
mm,
understand the Black African culture pretty well because we've spent years and years unpacking that. And now you're in a space where you're now still growing, still expanding, seeing the crossover between, oh, this is something that Annie has shared with me before. I'm seeing the crossover here. And it just helps you as a space holder have such better skills in terms of allowing people to feel safer in your presence, to share more. In fact, I had an interview with two women of color. They do not know each other. And I feel like their interviews were identical in terms of them addressing the kind of support that they're looking for when they engage with a coach, be it in a group program or one to one. And in group programs, there was this definitive desire of, I want to have that one to one time with the coach, particularly
mm,
if I'm in a space where I am the only one person of color, which is
mm,
likely how it often happens, given the kind of spaces that we have that are still not as racially diverse and inclusive. And the person just feels like there's certain things I cannot share in this all white space because I might look unintelligent. People may not understand why that is an issue for me, and for them, they're doing quite well. And even the person who's holding space may not know how to support me. So, why even bring it up? It's probably an area because maybe they're not doing this work that they're not equipped to hold space for me. And so, a lot of times, we are doing not only a disservice, but then somebody leaves that program feeling like, they didn't quite get me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's important, like when we are putting ourselves out there to hold a space for someone, to do that in a way that is in integrity and to do that with sensitivity and care. And it's why I've not only invested in this work, but also in being trauma informed and am continuously working on the types of spaces that I hold. I think too often it's easy in the coaching space because it's so unregulated to kind of just go, all right, I'm a business coach today, or I'm a life coach today, or I'm a mindset coach today, or like whatever it is that we want to create from our lived experience. And yes, lived experience counts for something, but not everyone is going to be able to follow the linear journey of your lived experience. And so I think a really skilled, well versed coach is one that is in continuous development and can coach people regardless of whether they've had the same life path or trajectory or complaints or concerns or desires as them. Like a skilled coach should be able to go anywhere with their clients.
Oh, 100%. And isn't that the secret sauce? Like, if we
Mm.
had more coaches who are well versed, trained, and had the skill to hold that kind of space, I can only imagine the amount of businesses that would be doing a lot better or thriving or seeing more and more racially diverse women getting into those spaces to talk about their dreams, their desires, and the kind of businesses that they want to grow and being in spaces where they feel conducive for that kind of growth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you can't show up somewhere bringing your full self, then it's going to be really hard to get the results, right? Like, and I've experienced this a lot in my early days where I was purely a strategy consultant, Jess, and hadn't done the work on being trauma informed or racially aware or any of those things. And I was just bringing my degrees and my expertise and corporate experience and being like, okay, I know strategy inside and out. I know like the steps. And what I was seeing is strategy only ever gets you so far.
Yes.
And then there would be this slump, and no amount of great strategy could get you past this if you weren't actually met as a human and understood in your wholeness, understood in the nuances of what does get in the way for you at a nervous system level, at a mindset level, at an identity level. What are the obstacles, and how can we create the strategy that is bespoke for you that you're actually going to be able to execute while also supporting all of you to come along for this journey and to grow and expand in the process. And that, when I started marrying all of those together, that is when the results have become far, far outreaching what they ever were before that with my clients. And it's just shows that the more, and I think a testament to the fact that we've worked together for so long, the more you know somebody, the more bespoke
Yeah.
that advice and that support can be. And the
Mm.
more likely you are to succeed as a result of that because it's designed for you. It's not something that's just being kind of taken off the rack and handed to you.
Yeah, yeah. And you just reminded me of something. When you're able to be that skilled in space holding, when I come to you with an issue, you're like, actually, I have a really good resource, Annie, that can be beneficial to you. That is not just a resource that's been written by a white person for white people, that it's a resource that you know will connect to me, my background, and I will have those. Maybe it will help unlock something that has blocked me because you are investing in resources that are not just from one kind of lens, but because of the work
Mhm.
that you're doing and the skills that you have, you're able to point me in the right direction. Whereas somebody who hasn't done this work may not be that skilled. And that is why as you're listening to this podcast and you're a space holder, it is so important as you move forward that these are things that you're prioritizing, because we're in such a saturated market where everybody is seemingly selling similar things. How are you standing out? And I mentioned the things that are not tangible about doing this work, the not tangible benefits. And I can say hand on heart, is how Jess makes me feel. Like I can
Mm.
bring her pretty much anything in terms of my fears or the things that are coming up. And I don't feel shame. I don't feel like she's going to belittle that. I don't feel like she's not going to get me. And there are times when she will need me to explain a little bit more, and she'll need to go away, and maybe it will sink in much later. Like, that's what you were trying to tell me. I didn't have the language or the understanding. I hadn't come across that before. But the non-tangible benefits of, doing this work is that one feels seen. Your clients feel seen. They feel heard. They feel valued. There's an essence of bringing themselves and not kind of trying to code switch or be somebody else that you end up
Mm.
coaching, but you're not really coaching the real them.
Yeah, and I've seen the impacts of that on the other side of the equation, where clients have come to me after working with other coaches or following somebody else's framework, and it kind of, yes, they might have created some level of success within their business, but often they're coming to me because they feel so disconnected from themselves and their business. They feel really maybe disempowered or disillusioned by their industry and their work, and they're probably feeling a little bit bored or burnt out. And that's really a result and or a symptom of the fact that you're creating a business based on somebody else's blueprint and somebody else's way of being rather than something that's for you. And so, yeah, I just want to also acknowledge and thank you for showing and sharing yourself, because I it's what makes life so much easier as a coach when you can see the full human in front of you and they are willing to kind of come in, fears and all, flaws and all, and just kind of be like, this is what's real here. And as someone, I just, as a side note for anyone that is stepping into any sort of coaching arrangement, like, your coach should be there to see you and hold you in all of that. And if you feel like you need to be anything but you and need to have this polished version of you and can only show up in a certain way, then frankly, you're working with the wrong coach, because you're not going to get the results that you desire if you can't even be yourself in the process of receiving that coaching.
Gosh, powerful.
Yeah.
The doors to my 10-week signature program, Represented, are now open and enrollments are taking place. If you would like me to support you to step into racial equity work and build an intentionally inclusive business that serves a racially diverse group of people, head over to anigishuru.com/represented for all the details. That's Anigishuru, GICHURU.com/represented. The live round commences on 11th April. Scholarships available to those who may need them. Now, I'm bringing it to the final question. But before I do, I want to share something. You mentioned blueprint, working with somebody who has this kind of blueprint strategy. This is how you do it. Like when I was looking to launch this podcast, and there are so many ways you can launch a podcast. And I feel like if you're in group programs where other people are launching podcasts, it'll be, here's the template. This is what we do. This is how we get you out there. This is how you create buzz. And everybody will be similarly doing the same thing, hoping to get the same results as the other person who might be more connected, know more people, have been in the game longer. And then maybe you launch and you wonder, why is it crickets? Why didn't I have the same success as the other person? But what I like with what we did together was, even when it came to something as simple as music, and you're like, why don't you get something created that's an original, that is African, that brings out, something that is the theme of the work that you do, rather than going on these platforms that have this royalty-free music? Why don't you do that? And I wanted to share that with you, listener, because it's so important to see how that was tailored to me, rather than saying, yeah, let's look for a track. Oh, that sounds so good. It's got your vibe and it's your thing. But this required us to get, to work with producers in Kenya. My sister is a professional gospel singer, and she had her tentacles, so to speak, all over this. And we got a brilliant vocalist who just brought out this, and it turned out better than I expected. You saw that vision that I hadn't even seen, Jess, whereas I was looking at it from a completely different lens. This is what other people are doing, so I need to get music, I need to do it this way and the other. But because of knowing me and knowing who I am and the things that what would bring out originality, because I always want to be an original, and that's something I always say in our sessions. You saw that and you helped me tap into that. So that's an example of a coach who gets you, who's not trying to create something that's worked for them or their clients and trying to replicate that for you in their way.
Yeah, and I think it comes also back to the fact of we know each other. If we didn't have a deep relationship where I wasn't aware that your sister was an incredible singer and that you had all these really gifted musical connections, then that wouldn't have even been a possibility as well. And so that's where sometimes people are like, oh, you don't need to have these conversations about their family and this, that, and the other. Whereas I'm like, I really get to know the lives of my clients. And
Yeah.
that's such a beautiful example as to why, because you just never know what possibilities and potentials and creative solutions are out there when you're like, oh, yeah, you've got this really incredible connection. Like it would be an opportunity missed because not everyone has access to that. And it is what makes it so unique in your podcast. And I love your desire to be original and that we keep that front and center of
Mhm.
every session and every way that we do it, because it does become a bit boring when you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, this person's following that thing, that launch framework again, and it becomes predictable. And as humans, our brains then start to disconnect because we kind of know what's coming next. There's no anticipation or surprise. We can kind of pick it a mile away what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we're trialing something. We want to trial something inside of my program, Represented. It's a program
Mm.
that Jess helped me create about 3 or 4 years ago, 3 or so years ago, and it's done incredibly well. It's my signature program. And we're trialing something new, which I think will be really, really exciting for those who come on board. And that is Jess hosting a call during one of the cohorts where you come in, and she's holding space for you, particularly for those who are wanting to have a deeper understanding. How have you gotten to where you are? How have you been able to actually build a sustainable business that is even profitable by centering inclusion? How is that a possibility? Because I feel like a lot of people, their understanding is that's a good to have. I'm not there. That's a cherry on the top. I'm just here for the cake. You don't need to give me the icing. I'm good. Bare minimum is fine. But I think having that space with you, understanding how you arrived here, but also being held for space by somebody who possibly gets them, another white woman who's doing this work, and maybe some of the things that one might feel like, I don't know if I can ask Annie that. I don't know if that's appropriate, even though the space I've created is so inclusive to asking those questions, because I often believe there is no unapproachable question that you can ask because it's important for us to grow. Jess, what do you want to say about that bonus call?
Oh, I'm just really excited to one, be welcomed into your community. I think the women that you attract is always such a phenomenal lineup of people that are doing really incredible things in the world. So there's that element that I'm really, really just a little bit awestruck by, to be honest. I would do represented every single round just to get to know the women in your world because they're always so incredible. And also, yeah, I think to offer that different perspective, because what did help me in my journey, like to go back full circle to the story, was having Kate, who had done this work herself and had built her business based on these values. And it was so deeply entrenched in her business. And I believe a huge reason for her business success. And so to kind of have that opportunity for the women coming into represented to have a conversation and to kind of see where it can go and how it can look as well. Because I know sometimes when we come into a program initially, like something like represented, which is quite intensive, we have all of these big intentions and we're like, oh my God, I'm going to do all this. And that's certainly how I walked into it. And here
Yeah.
I am 3 years later, still unpacking, still in the work. And to know that Rome wasn't built in a day. I'm not all of a sudden in this 10-week container going to create, you know, the world's biggest shift in everything that I do and everything that I am. What I see represented as is this beautiful catalyst and a beautiful opening of your eyes and your awareness to then go on and create and take these tangible impacts. And I think that that's why I took represented multiple times, and I know other people have, is because it's almost like the first time you're doing it, you're seeing everything for the first time. And there are some things that you just need to deepen into. And it makes sense to come back and have those conversations. And so, yeah, to be able to be a part of that and to support you and support the women and support this work in the world, I feel so honored, honestly.
I could not think of a better person. I could not think, honestly, of a better person. And what a full circle moment, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
from beginning of 20, and this call out didn't even happen like post George Floyd
No,
because
it was
what
pre.
it was
Yeah.
pre. This was like in March. It was way, way earlier than that. And so that wasn't even the thing that was the big, big catalyst. It happened way before, months before. And what a full circle moment this is to, like, if somebody had told you 3 years down the track, you will be holding space in
Yeah.
the program, like what? Me?
Yeah. To even now to think that, I'm like, really? You sure, Annie?
Yes, yes. And here's the thing. Here's the thing. This is not a decision that's been made lightly. When you watch somebody's journey and you know their sincerity, it's not just about their intention, but the impact they leave on you. I want you all who end up coming inside of Represented to experience that. To experience that what Jess has given me, that you can get that too, but also see that this work is a possibility. And it wouldn't be a possibility if you didn't stay in the work. Because if this was something you did back in 2020 and you're like, okay, I'm done, I've spoken to Kate Northrup, I'm good, you wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be having
No.
this conversation. Things would, who knows, would if there would be a program like Represented or what it would look like. But you
Mm,
stayed in the work, and these are the fruits, the benefits of those seeds that were planted early.
yeah. Yes. So beautifully said, Annie. And I think it is so important to consider this work like a seed, because it's not the here's the 5 steps and you're going to get these instant results. It is a work in progress. And that's why it's so important that if you are stepping into it, you're doing it because your heart's in it, because it aligns with your values. And that is the thing that gets to lead. And the business results, the income, all of that is just a beautiful byproduct. It's not the driving force.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. If fear was not a factor, Jess Miller, last question. How would you show up for your work?
Oh, powerful, Annie. You didn't prep me on this question.
Mhm.
Me on the spot. If fear wasn't a factor, do you know what? If fear wasn't a factor, I would be far more outspoken than I am about issues of social justice, systemic issues of racism, capitalism, sexism. I have a lot of conversations around these sorts of just these issues that really deeply affect the lives of so many people in this world. And there is a fear of bringing these conversations to the fore, and there is a fear of what will people think, of loss of belonging, of loss of validation and acknowledgement, because it goes against so much of what we're conditioned to believe and taught to do and be. So yeah, if fear wasn't a factor, that is what I would do, Annie. I would have a podcast of my own maybe, and share the conversations that I have behind the scenes in a more public way.
So be more outspoken. All right. Now, people are obsessing over you right now. They're like scrambling on their phones, going like, where can I find out more about Jess? Who is this Jess Miller? So let's save them the scrambling. How can they connect with you?
Look, I'm making it much more conscious effort to be a lot more active on Instagram these days. So you can come and find me at jessmiller.co on Instagram. And if you want to DM me profit, I will also send you the link to my profit plan, which you can access for free. And that will also take you through a really unique and sustainable approach to generating really luscious profits in your business in a way that is good for you and good for the collective.
I love that luscious profit. That just kind of got me ding, ding, ding. Jess, thank you so much for saying yes to this. Thank you for bringing your whole self. And you and I have conversations on Zoom for hours. And we've done that for years, and we do not know how to stop ourselves. So we're going to end it here, people. And Jess, I believe, will be back again and again and again. But for now, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Annie. It is always a delight to get to spend time with you.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented.